who get better educated to take the jobs that are going to put you on the good side of this kind of income disparity we talk about in this country. And I think we're far behind. And now you look at, I think about my days of when I went to college and what college education cost and what percentage of that college education my federal grant was able to pay. It was a big percentage of that. And that's totally off the table now. So I mean, we've fallen behind in so many things in this country when it comes to kind of government and societal supports to kind of prepare people for, for the jobs of the 21st century. Sound like one of the candidates.
Let me add a couple points to that, if I might. I mean, first of all, I agree with Michael that we need better safety nets, as it were, so that when people fall out due to, say, a global competition of a good job, say, in a manufacturing sector, that there's some supports there to keep their living standards from sliding. But I'd like to think of that safety net as a trampoline. Excuse me if I'm getting too far out in this.
The metaphor.
And you bounce the trampoline. You don't just stay there. You're like a safety net where you just kind of hang out, and at least you didn't hit the ground, but you're not bouncing back. Right. I like a trampoline where you hit the trampoline and you bounce back up. And so how are you going to recover? How are you going to bounce back up? Well, as I was saying a second ago, I think public policy needs to create more jobs, more labor demand in economic terms for precisely the kind of work that we're offshoring and outsourcing. And the best place to do that seems to me in green technology. I mean, we have big infrastructure needs in this country. The American Society of Civil Engineers gives our public infrastructure, and that's our bridges, our schools, our water systems, our levees, and so on, communications, airports, highways. They give us a grade of a D and tell us we have about $1 trillion deficit in our public infrastructure, and people know what we're talking about, the bridges, the schools, etc. Well, that's a lot of work that needs to be done, and a lot of doing that job can be good jobs. And also, we now have, or beginning to have, I'd say we're at the beginning of understanding how to do that work in a way that's much more in sync with our environmental needs. Now, I live in Alexandria, Virginia, and in Alexandria, Virginia, we recently built the greenest high school in the country, and I'm very proud of that point. And this is really the environmental high school. It's going to use less water, it's going to use less oil to heat the place because it's so smartly built. There's solar involved, and of course there's wind turbine. There's so many options here. We have needs on the demand side. We have workers on the supply side. I think that's something to try to match.
I was going to ask that, too. You just mentioned, you came out of the conversation talking about the jobs of the 21st century. Any other jobs that you might suggest?
I think green technologies is one of the first ones I think of when I think of that. And really anything, engineering. I just went down to Houston, Texas, and did a story down there about sort of the energy boom down there. And those companies are knocking themselves out to find geologists, to find petroleum engineers. People, if you tend to have a technical education, healthcare is a growing area in our economy, even now with all the job loss and so on. So if you get trained in certain things, you will work in this society.
You wrote about the recovery, or somewhat recovery, of the steel industry as well. Does that hold any promise for people?
Well, there aren't. The recovery has been more for the companies than for the employees. It's like it's been that way in so many parts of the economy, because a part of what's brought a lot of the U.S. steel companies back beyond the tremendous growth in global demand, which has taken a lot of the steel off the market that used to be dumped, some would say dumped in the United States, is, it's just, been growth in jobs there.
Right. And interesting you should mention, because it reminded me of that time just after this country's Great Depression in the 1920s, in the previous century, where government sort of turned itself, took those great numbers of people who were unemployed and put them back to work, creating this infrastructure that we now have that probably could use that workforce again.
It's a really interesting point, Elliot, because we are not in anywhere near close to, of course, a depression situation. Not even clear if we're in a recession. That said, there are really large groups of people out there, workers, jobless folks who haven't even been able to find their way into the job market through one reason reason or another, having to do with their own personal disadvantages or the lack of access to jobs in their areas. There are lots of people out here who are very much underutilized in our job market. And we talk about the unemployment rate. It's 5.5% right now. That doesn't sound that high. The underemployment rate, which is a much more complete measure, which includes some of these underutilized folks I've been talking about, that's almost 10%. And so we've got a lot of people out there who need work. We have a lot of needs in terms of our infrastructure. It absolutely would make sense to marry those two. Now, to do so takes resources. You know, there really is no free lunch. Right. So, you know, that, I don't want to leave that out, but the need is there.
Yeah. Isn't it? And those are jobs that can't be outsourced. They can't, you know, right. They can't go to India, you know. I mean, these are jobs that would be performed right here in this country by people in this country, and it would serve a large public need.
With the time remaining, let me ask both of you gentlemen, we asked a lot of folks in the street today, and as we talked about earlier, nobody really had a good idea of how to jumpstart the economy. Of course, we were asking people who are basically laymen, and it's like, I know it's broke, I want it fixed. But in your opinion, going forward, the best way to jumpstart this economy?
You know, I like the guy who said, there's not all that much you can do. You're just going to have to let this thing play out. He has it at least half right, in my opinion. The thing that's holding the economy back right now, if you had to sort of focus on one sector, is, of course, the housing sector. Housing is a critically important part of the economy, not just because housing is the main form of wealth for so many people, but because housing has so many up and downstream industries. I mean, it's construction, it's real estate, it's financial markets, and the housing market is still undergoing what economists call a correction, meaning that this bubble that inflated and then exploded is going to take another 6 to 12 months to clean up. Now, once this correction is done, basically meaning housing prices fall as far as they're going to fall. Now, that hasn't happened yet. They're down about 15% nationwide. They may have to fall another 10%. Once, yeah, it's tough, but that's the reality of it. I mean, the moral of the story is don't inflate bubbles, but that's for the next time around. But you know, once as that correction is ongoing, there's going to be precisely the kinds of pain we've been talking about. And I think the best thing to do while that's going on is to contemplate these kinds of Keynesian stimulus that we've talked about earlier, where when the private sector engine of growth is stalled, the public sector steps in and helps to kind of close that gap.
Yeah. Would you agree, Michael?
I'm not going to argue with the economists here, but also think long term, though, this country has to do something about health care. I mean, I think it's killing employers. I mean, you talk to GM, how much they're paying, you know, for health care for their employees. You know, it's just hurting a lot of businesses. And I think the sooner this country does something to get a handle on it, whether it's, you know, universal coverage or something, to get this cost in a way under control so businesses can plan. If you look at the lack of wage growth, part of that is that companies that do offer health benefits are paying a lot more for those. And a lot of what may go to someone's pocketbook is instead going to the insurance company to provide health care. And I think that's going to have to change. It feels unsustainable to me.
Yeah, 2 words, insurance reform.
Yeah.
Oh, just me. But gentlemen, thank you very much for coming in here today, talking the numbers with us and the possibilities down the line. Thank you very much, both of you, for sharing what could be some insights going forward, things that we can use, certainly. Michael Fletcher from the Washington Post and Jared Bernstein, thank you both for joining us here on American Dream tonight.
My pleasure.
And, of course, as always, you can continue the conversation online at our email address at americandream@presstv.com. That's where you will find an opportunity to share your comments, questions, show ideas, and your criticisms. We'll read your emails once a week or maybe even twice a week here on the show, and we'll even answer you back occasionally. That's at americandream@presstv.com. That's our show for this evening. Till next time, take care.